Oh, yes, hello there. Well, if you'll recall, yesterday, Johnson was meeting by chance with a chum of his from, I think, 40 years ago or so from school. And Boswell, as usual, is narrating. When we got to Dr. Johnson's house and were seated in his library, the dialogue went on admirably. Edwards said, "Sir, I remember you would not let us say prodigious at college, for even then, sir," turning to me, "he was delicate in language, and we all him." Johnson said to me afterwards, "Sir, they respected me for my literature, and yet it was not great, but by comparison, sir, it is amazing how little literature there is in the world." But this time he said to Edwards, "From your having practiced the law long, sir, I presume you must be rich." Edwards said, "No, sir, I got a good deal of money, but I had a number of poor relations to whom I gave a great part of it." Johnson said, "Sir, you have been rich in the most valuable sense of the word." Edwards said, "But I shall not die rich." Johnson said, "Nay, sure, sir, it is better to live rich than to die rich." Edwards said, "I wish I had continued at college." Johnson said, "Why do you wish that, sir?" Edwards answered, "Because I think I should have had a much easier life than mine has been. I should have been a parson and had a good living, like Bloxham and several others, and lived comfortably." Johnson answered, "Sir, the life of a parson, of a conscientious clergyman, is not easy. I have always considered a clergyman as the father of a larger family than he is able to maintain. I would rather have chancery suits upon my hands than the cure of souls. No, sir, I do not even envy a clergyman's life as an easy life, nor do I envy the clergyman who makes it an easy life." Here, taking himself up all of a sudden, he exclaimed, "Oh, Mr. Edwards, I'll convince you that I recollect you. Do you remember our drinking together in an alehouse near Pembroke Gate? At that time you told me of the Eton boy, who, when verses on our Saviour's turning water into wine were as prescribed as an exercise, brought up a single line which was highly admired. Vidit et irrobut lympha pudica deum. The modest nymph saw her god and blushed." This line has frequently been attributed to Dryden, when a king's scholar at Westminster, but neither Eton nor Westminster have a truth any claim to it, the line being borrowed with a slight change from an epigram by Crowshaw, Joanne 2, aqua in venum versae unde rubor vestris et non sue purpura lymphis, quo rosa muratus teum nova mutat aquas numem convive praesens agnosita numen nympha pudica deum vidit et erubet. Anyway, back to the story. "And I told you at another fine line in Camden's Remains, an eulogy upon one of our kings, who was succeeded by his son, a prince of equal merit. Mira cano sol occupit, nox nulla sequesto est. I sing a marvel, the sun set, but no night followed," perhaps by Gladius Cambrensis, or Giraldus Cambrensis. Anyway, basically, Johnson is just quoting some stuff he said when he was drinking with this guy. Edwards responded, "You are a philosopher, Dr. Johnson. I have tried, too, in my time to be a philosopher, but I don't know how. Cheerfulness was always breaking in. Mr. Burke, Sir Joshua Reynolds, Mr. Courtenay, Mr. Malone, and indeed all of the eminent men to whom I have mentioned this have thought it an exquisite trait of character. The truth is that philosophy, like religion, is too generally supposed to be hard and severe, at least so grave as to exclude all gaiety." Edwards said, "I have been twice married, doctor. You, I suppose, have never known what it was to have a wife." Johnson answered, "Sir, I have known what it was to have a wife, and In a solemn, tender, faltering tone, he said here, I have known what it was to lose a wife. It had almost broke my heart. Edward said, How do you live, sir? For my part, I must have my regular meals and a glass of good wine. I find I require it. Johnson said, I now drink no wine, sir. Early in life I drank wine. For many years I drank none. I then for some years drank a great deal. Edward said, Some hogsheads, I warrant you. Johnson said, I then had a severe illness, and I left it off, and I have never begun it again. I never felt any difference upon myself from eating one thing rather than another, nor from one kind of weather rather than another. There are people, I believe, who feel a difference, but I am not one of them. And as to regular meals, I have fasted from the Sunday's dinner to Tuesday's dinner without any inconvenience. I believe it is best to eat just as one is hungry, but a man who is in business or a man who has a family must have stated meals. I am a straggler. I may leave this town and go to Grand Cairo without being missed here or observed there. Edwards responded, Don't you eat supper, sir? Johnson said, No, sir. Edwards asked. Edwards said, For my part, now, I consider supper as a turnpike through which one must pass in order to get to bed. Footnote here from Boswell. I am not absolutely sure, but this was my own suggestion, though it is truly in the character of Edwards. Johnson said, You are a lawyer, Mr. Edwards. Lawyers know life practically. A bookish man should always have them to converse with. They have what he wants. Edwards said, I am grown old. I am 65. Johnson said, I shall be 68 next birthday. Come, sir, drink water and put in for 100. Come, sir, drink water and put in for 100. Mr. Edwards mentioned a gentleman, says here in a footnote, the Reverend James Phillips, McLean's from McLean's Pembroke College, we picked that up, who had left his whole fortune to Pembroke College. Johnson said, Whether to leave one's whole fortune to a college be right must depend upon circumstances. I would leave the interest of the fortune I bequeath to a college to my relations or my friends for their lives. It is the same thing to a college, which is a permanent society, whether it gets the money now or 20 years hence. And I would wish to make my relations or friends feel the benefit of it. This interview confirmed my opinion of Johnson's most humane and benevolent heart. His cordial and placid behavior to an old fellow collegian, a man so different from himself, and his telling him that he would go down to his farm and visit him, showed a kindliness of disposition very rare at an advanced age. He observed how wonderful it was that they had both been in London 40 years without having ever once met, and both walkers in the street too. Mr. Edwards, when going away, again recurred to his conscientiousness of senility, and looking full in Johnson's face, said to him, You'll find in Dr. Young, O my Covels, remnants of yourselves. This is from Night Thoughts. Johnson did not relish this at all, but shook his head with impatience. Edwards walked off, seemingly highly pleased with the honor of having been thus noticed by Dr. Johnson. When he was gone, I said to Johnson, I thought him but a weak man. Johnson said, Why, sir, yes, sir. Here is a man who has passed through life without experience. Yet I would rather have him with me than a more sensible man who will not talk readily. This man is always willing to say what he wants to say, or what he has to say. Yet Dr. Johnson had himself by no means that willingness which he praised so much, and I think so justly. For who has not felt the painful effect of the dreary void when there is a total silence in a company for any length of time, or, which is as bad, or perhaps worse, when the conversation is with difficulty kept up by perpetual efforts? Johnson once observed to me, Tom Tyres described me the best, sir, said he. You are like a ghost. You never speak till you are spoken to. The gentleman whom he thus familiarly mentioned was Mr. Thomas Tyre, son of Mr. Jonathan Tyre, the founder of that excellent place of public amusement, Vauxhall Gardens, which must ever be an estate to its proprietor, as it is peculiarly adapted to the taste of the English nation. There being a mixture of curious show, gay exhibition, music, vocal and instrumental, not too refined for the general ear, for all which only a shilling is paid. And though last, not least, good eating and drinking for those who choose to purchase that regale. Footnote here about being a shilling is paid. In summer 1792, additional and more expensive decorations having been introduced, the price of admission was raised to 2 shillings. I cannot approve of this. The company may be more select, but a number of the honest commonality are, I fear, excluded from sharing an elegant, innocent entertainment. An attempt to abolish the 1 shilling gallery at the Playhouse has been very properly counteracted. Anyway, Mr. Thomas Tyre was bred to the law, but having a handsome fortune, vivacity of temper, and eccentricity of mind, he could not confine himself to the regularity of practice. He therefore ran around about the world with a pleasant carelessness, amusing everybody by his desultory conversation. He abounded in anecdote, but was not sufficiently attentive to accuracy. I therefore cannot venture to avail myself much of a biographical sketch of Johnson which he published, being one among the various persons ambitious of appending their names to that of my illustrious friend. That sketch is, however, an entertaining little collection of fragments. Those which he published of Pope and Addison are of higher merit. Excuse me, a little indigestion right now. But his fame must chiefly rest upon his political conferences, in which he introduces several eminent persons delivering their sentiments in the way of dialogue and discovers a considerable share of learning, various knowledge, and discernment of character. This much may I be allowed to say of a man who was exceedingly obliging to me and who lived with Dr. Johnson in an easy manner as almost any of his very numerous acquaintances. Mr. Edwards had said to me aside that Dr. Johnson should have been of a profession. I repeated the remark to Johnson that I might have his own thoughts on the subject. Johnson said, "Sir, it would have been better that I had been of a profession. I ought to have been a lawyer." I said, "I do not think, sir, it would have been better, for we should not have had the English dictionary." Johnson answered, "But you would have had reports." I said, "Aye, but there would not have been another who could have written the dictionary. There have been many very good judges. Suppose you had been Lord Chancellor, you would have delivered opinions with more extent of mind and in a more ornamental manner than perhaps any chancellor ever did, or ever will do. But I believe causes have been as judiciously decided as you could have done." Johnson answered, "Yes, sir, property has been as well settled." Johnson, however, had a noble ambition floating in his mind, and had undoubtedly often speculated on the possibility of his supereminent powers being rewarded in the great and liberal country by the highest honors of the state. Sir William Scott informs me that upon the death of the late Lord Lichfield, who was Chancellor of the University of Oxford, he said to Johnson, "What a pity it is, sir, that you did not follow the profession of the law. You might have been Lord Chancellor of Great Britain and attained to the dignity of the peerage, and now that the title of Lichfield, your native city, is extinct, you might have had it." Johnson, upon this, seemed much agitated, and in an angry tone exclaimed, "Why will you vex me by suggesting this when it is too late?" But he did not repine at the prosperity of others. The late Dr. Thomas Leland told Mr. Courtenay that when Mr. Edmund Burke showed Johnson his fine house and lands near Beaconsfield, Johnson coolly said, Non equidam invidio mirror magis. I grudge thee not, for I marvel. From Virgil. Now a long footnote on this topic. I am not entirely without suspicion that Johnson may have felt a little momentary envy, for no man loves the good things of this life better than he did, and he could not but be conscious that he deserved a much larger share of them than he ever had. I attempted in a newspaper to comment on the above passage in the manner of Warburton, who must be allowed to have shown uncommon ingenuity in giving to any author's text whatever meaning he chose it should carry. As this imitation may amuse my readers, I shall here introduce it. And this is the quoted part. No saying of Dr. Johnson's has been more misunderstood than his supplying to Mr. Burke, when he first saw him at his fine place at Beaconsfield, non equidem invidio mirror magis. I grudge thee not, rather I marvel. These two celebrated men have been friends for many years before Mr. Burke entered on his parliamentary career. They were both writers, both members of the literary club. When, therefore, Dr. Johnson saw Mr. Burke in a situation so much more splendid than that into which he himself had attained, he did not mean to express that he thought a disproportionate prosperity, but while he, as a philosopher, asserted an exemption from envy, non equidem invidio, he went on in the words of the poet Mirror Magus, thereby signifying either that he was occupied in admiring what he was glad to see, or perhaps that considering the general lot of men of superior abilities, he wondered that fortune, who is represented as blind, should, in this instance, have been so just. Yet no man had a higher notion of the dignity of literature than Johnson, or was more determined in maintaining the respect which he justly considered as due to it. Of this, besides the general tenor of his conduct in society, some characteristical instances may be mentioned. He told Sir Joshua Reynolds that once, when he dined in a numerous company of booksellers, where the room being small, the head of the table at which he sat was almost close to the fire, he persevered in suffering a great deal of inconvenience from the heat, rather than quit his place and let one of them sit above him. Goldsmith, in his diverting simplicity, complained one day in a mixed company of Lord Camden. I met him, said he, at Lord Clare's house in the country, and he took no more notice of me than if I had been an ordinary man. The company having laughed heartily, Johnson stood forth in defense of his friend. Nay, gentlemen, said he, Dr. Goldsmith is in the right. A nobleman ought to have made up to such a man as Goldsmith, and I think it is much against Lord Camden that he neglected him. Nor could he patiently endure to hear that such respect as he thought due only to higher intellectual qualities should be bestowed on men of slighter, though perhaps more amusing talents. I told him that one morning when I went to breakfast with Garrick, who was very vain of his intimacy with Lord Camden, he accosted me thus. Pray now, did you meet a little lawyer turn the corner, eh? No, sir, I said. Pray, what do you mean by the question? Why, replied Garrick, with an affected indifference, just as if standing on tiptoe, Lord Camden has this moment left me. We have had a long walk together. Johnson said, Well, Sir Garrick talked very properly. Lord Camden was a little lawyer to be associating so familiarly with a player. Sir Joshua Reynolds observed with great truth that Johnson considered Garrick to be, as it were, his property. He would allow no man either to blame or to praise Garrick in his presence without contradicting him. I love it when he makes fun of actors. And that's interesting. I always forget that, Johnson really doesn't have a job. I mean, he got basically a grant from the state, and he wrote his dictionary on his free time, I guess. I don't know. He didn't he get an honorable doctorate? So he's kind of just a freelancer. I never think about that. Anyway, till next time, bye from Boswell.